Welcome back to the Open World Forum. We are discussing about very interesting thing today about open source. We have two main guests around the table for an interesting debate. It's two guests, I think, that don't agree about everything. James Utzschneider, sorry about your name, it's difficult. Even if I'm French, it's a French name, but Utzschneider, it's difficult to say for me.
You said it perfectly.
You're in charge of the open source worldwide strategy at Microsoft, and Simon Phipps, you're chief strategy officer at ForgeRock.
More relevantly, I'm a director of the Open Source Initiative.
Okay. Tell us a little bit more about the Open Source Initiative, perhaps.
Okay, so the Open Source Initiative was started 12 years ago. It flowed out of the desire to have a pragmatic approach to software freedom. The ideals of software freedom were already strong by then from the Free Software Foundation. But what was happening in the computer industry was that the Mozilla Foundation was just coming into existence. And it became obvious that there was a need to express the ideals of software freedom in a way that was pragmatically and goal-oriented rather than required philosophy in order to support it. So the Open Source Initiative was formed to pragmatically promote the idea of open source software, and particularly to focus on software licensing, to validate licenses as freedom-promoting licenses, and to, over the years, both advance the practice of open source software licensing and to promote the philosophy of open source. So today, OSI is still in business. There are 10 directors. Its main role is to validate licenses still, although we're just now in the process of revising and reforming the Open Source Initiative. And over the next year, I hope that we'll see individual membership and a broadened scope for its goals and ideals.
How do you feel today to sit on the same table than Microsoft to talk about open source? It's something relatively new for you.
It's actually not, because in my past I used to work on the Java platform, so I used to constantly find myself with Microsoft staff debating whether it was Java or .NET that was going to rule the world. Mm-hmm. So it's a fairly familiar experience. Microsoft, of course, in the free software community has a significant karma deficit, is the best way to put it, I think. And so James falls in the long tradition of a number of people who've had the job of trying to harmonize Microsoft and its position to open source software. They're in the middle of a charm offensive with the open source movement and with the free software movement. So it doesn't really surprise me to find myself here.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because James told on another interview that it was a congress about open innovation, open enterprise, open society, and that they are not so open on that because they didn't want that Microsoft was sponsors. It's interesting.
Do you think we should be allowed to have our logo up here along with other great open source companies like Hewlett-Packard and Oracle?
Absolutely, because certainly, one of the interesting things about Microsoft is Microsoft has been one of the most honest opponents of open source software. Other companies, naming no names on this list up here, but other companies want to frustrate the goals of software freedom, but do it while pretending to love it. Microsoft has never pretended to love it. To them, it's always been a cancer, and it's always been something to detest. And actually, what's happening at the moment is they're now becoming less honest, in my view. They're actually beginning to conceal their opposition to open source because they've worked out that it was good for companies beginning with O and I to pretend they loved it while actually working against it. Yeah. So I actually respect Microsoft as having the integrity to actually say what they think rather than to conceal it behind funny marketing.
I'm glad you think we speak with integrity. Having had suffered from cancer personally, I can assure you that most people at Microsoft do not view open source as a cancer.
So has Mr. Gates ever withdrawn that comment?
He's not the one who said it.
Oh, he's not? So who was the one that said it?
Steve Ballmer said it 9 years ago. And what's fascinating about some of the people who are in the open source community, they have very, very long memories. And they want to have their views of companies like Microsoft shaped by things that occurred a decade ago and not things that occurred this week.
But you're still under the same leadership, though. So surely it's reasonable to expect that there's a continuity of vision.
There's some leadership that's there, but some leadership like Robert Youngjohns, who worked with you at Sun, is now running our sales operations. You know, so like on Monday, we announced that we were migrating 30 million of some of our best customers who use Windows Live Spaces blogging. We're migrating them over to an open source solution on WordPress. That's not the sort of thing Microsoft would have done 10 years ago.
Absolutely.
How can you watch behavior like that and say we haven't changed as a company and become more open?
Deciding that you're going to sink your losses and go with WordPress is different to deciding that you're going to collaboratively develop the parts of the Windows platform. Microsoft...
Correct, it is.
Microsoft has never pretended that its actual revenue products are going to be open source based, although some of them have been open source based. So, for example, the TCP/IP stack in Windows for many, many years was based on open source software, but not the kind you had to own up to using.
But whether or not we decide to take Windows and Office and transition them to open source is completely different from Microsoft's overall approach to working with the open source community.
Okay.
And we can work with open source people on a regular basis and still maintain many of our existing businesses.
So that's true, and one of the characteristics of corporate engagement with open source is it does evolve over time. An executive who I know well once said that it's like introducing corporations to open source is like bringing up children. You have to reward the things they do right rather than punish the things they do wrong. And I do believe there is certainly a sense in which it's worth welcoming the things that Microsoft does right. I think it's great that Microsoft is involved in WordPress. I think that if that means that Microsoft is going to be contributing on WordPress.org, that's even better. All the same, open source is the expression of software freedom, and so far in its goals as a company and its business methods, Microsoft has not been a promoter of software freedom. It's a supporter of open source in the sense of using collaborative code, but Microsoft does not want to have co-developed open platforms. It does not want to liberate customers from lock-in. It typically still has the same business methods as its main competitors. As companies like IBM and Oracle are also still dedicated and devoted to lock-in rather than to open co-development of core products. So I think there is one side of me which is which welcomes Microsoft's opening up, and that is a thoroughly good thing, and that is to be welcomed. If that's the only thing we talk about, then I'll be unhappy, because there is also the side of wanting to see Microsoft embrace rather than frustrate software freedom.
Well, from our perspective, when it comes to this environment, there was one clap for that.
Yes, Mike.
Okay, so
Just
from our
here.
perspective...
There we go. They can hear you now.
From our perspective, and from the perspective of most IT managers, who are really, the end of the day, the audience that we connect with when we talk about this topic, what we want to get across is that the Microsoft that called Linux a cancer 9 years ago has evolved and changed. And there's 3 areas that we want to point out to people and how we've done so. The first is that when it comes to our interactions with other companies and other ISVs and open source communities, we actually are doing a much better job of playing well with others than we have in the past.
Totally.
If you look at our support for standards, we're formal members of 150 standards groups, 350 standards organizations.
But can we avoid diversifying into a discussion about standards and interoperability, because that's a different topic?
See, from my perspective, they're all aspects of the same discussion about how technology from different companies can work together, enabling customers to build great solutions.
But if you want to develop the trust of the free software community, you should avoid migrating into discussions of open standards and interoperability, because that is seen as a way of diverting the topic away from your areas of weakness into your areas of anticipated strength.
Fascinating perspective. Our number one goal in life as an organization is to not, first and foremost, develop a sense of trust with free software people. Okay? Our number one goal in life is to enable customers who want to build solutions that use our stuff and use open source stuff to have those things work together with as little discussion about dogma and religion as possible.
Right.
So we want to do that, and then as we move to the cloud, we want to respect and address concerns voiced by you and others that the cloud is just some big scheme to lock everyone in, and to move to the cloud in an open manner. So right now, in our Azure environment, we support multiple different types of open source applications and programming languages for building applications out on
Right.
Azure. You, as an employee of Sun Microsystems 5 years ago, could you have envisioned Microsoft promoting in this strategic cloud platform of ours that we would use, that we would support open source implementations of Java running in our data centers?
I actually fully anticipated you would do so eventually, because
then you're a smart guy.
Because I was amazed that Microsoft didn't work out sooner that publicly hating open source was bad for your karma, your general karma rating. And so I had been expecting by 2006 Microsoft to fix it.
Well, I guess we were late by a year or two.
And you burned through 2 open source community managers while you were trying to do that. And I certainly hope, given your career, I'm assuming you have a lot more air cover than some of your predecessors in the role that you're playing.
My predecessors didn't really burn out. They were promoted and moved on to other things.
Okay.
I think it's a very interesting debate. It's a best debate for me because I have anything to do. I just have to listen to you. It's perfect for me. It's really perfect. But I think that you have other conferences you have to attend. So thank you very much. I think that the subject is very interesting, and that even if there's a lot of respect between your company and your ideas, there's a lot of things to explain, and I'm sure that Microsoft have to explain more and more and more about what you are, not the bad guy that we were speaking about.
And as I said in the last interview, let's put our name on this wall.
You just have to ask to Philip. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us for this debate, and we will see you soon on another debate on the open source, open web forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Nice meeting you.